Thank you to VAIM for sponsoring a portion of this video. It's the same phone as last year. Same phone as last year, different body. You've heard the noise, but is it really? Let's find out. I think it's really easy to look at the spec sheet or even look at the S25 Ultra itself and say like, it's the same as last year. And honestly, the same as the year before that. In a lot of ways, years and years before that. And I really get that argument. But is it the whole picture with the phone? I mean, that's the lens that at least I view competitors' phones through. It's only fair to do that with Samsung here as well. But like with a lot of things, it's not the full story. And with the starting price of $1,300, just being good won't cut it. So first of all, I used this phone for 3 weeks. And honestly, I went all over different extremes with this phone before I finally settled on an opinion. And I promised to give like a buy or not buy recommendation. But I think the first thing you notice with any phone is the design. And I'd forgive you if at first glance, you could not tell a difference between the S24 Ultra and the S25 Ultra, especially if you're just looking at pictures. It does have a slightly more boxy design, which I like, overall flatter on the sides. And I really like the rounded corners that they had. The S24 Ultra weirdly was like sharp in your hand when it hit it. This just feels more refined, and it somehow feels better in the hand than a lot of phones of the same size. The materials here are new as well, titanium and stronger Gorilla Glass, but I always like to quote Zach from Jerry Rigs Everything. I don't care how strong the glass is when glass meets concrete. The concrete will always win. So just from like a dimensional standpoint, it's 0.48 ounces lighter than S24 Ultra and 1.4 millimeters narrower, which makes a giant difference. It's also slightly thinner as well, but 0.0 of that matters. The phone in the hand looks and feels a lot lighter than the spec sheet says, if that matters. On the back, it's pretty obvious. There are more pronounced camera rings. It was already pretty pronounced before, but then they put extra rings on top of it. I don't know how much any of this matters to most people out there, because I'm assuming you're gonna put a case on it anyway. But if you do go on natural, it does feel really good. And while I'm kind of talking about stuff on the back, it does have Qi 2 for wireless charging, which sounds awesome, but it does not have the MagSafe-esque sort of magnet array that Qi 2 can have. I think that would have been nice to have here. Some very small in the weed changes that I think make the design feel more refined. This is something, unless you change phones a lot, you probably wouldn't notice. They moved the pin port on the SIM tray to the opposite side. It used to be right next to the microphone port, and I have stuck a paperclip or a pin into that microphone port a ton of times. So just something to be aware of. Not all the changes here are things that you can see. It does have a 40% larger vapor chamber, which is gonna translate to a way cooler phone. Actually, I think the tech chap did a really good job showing the heat dissipation on the phone. So I'm gonna let him show you, but that's gonna translate to about 10% better battery life, which is not a small number, especially from the same battery as last year. And I will add, I think Samsung missed a giant opportunity to not debut some new battery tech that's being used by other flagships. So you can say whatever you want about Samsung, but I think even the most tribalistic of haters have to at least pay a little bit of respect for their displays. Samsung nailed this display, even if it's not giantly different than last year. 6.9 inches display. It's a little bit bigger than last year's 6.8. 2600 nits of peak brightness with a 30% thinner bezels on the front, which is absolutely noticeable. Same anti-reflective coating we saw last year, which you think is gonna be like a screen protector. You can just see it on a spec sheet. It doesn't make it look matte. What it does mean is when you're outside, and not just indirect sunlight trying to do stuff, but if you're just outside in general trying to text or see a keyboard or zoom in on an image, those things make a giant difference here. And you could use this phone outdoors without any difficulty at all. So I think for Samsung, this screen is a huge win. And again, nothing dramatic, just refined from last year. Samsung really, in their heart of hearts, wants to talk to you about Galaxy AI. And I think at this point, there's a lot of AI fatigue. We've got AI in bird feeders. We've got AI in toaster ovens. AI is like the buzzword I've kind of just glassed over when I hear AI. But what Samsung is doing here, while not new by any means, I think is the best implementation of AI on a phone that I've seen, and that includes what Google's doing. The generative stuff is really neat, surprisingly useful. Here's like the popular test that everybody's doing with their hands. And when you remove the hand, it does look like my brother more than me, but it does complete the face. And I thought that was really cool. That's not obviously an everyday use case. You're not taking shots like this all the time. There are things that you might want to move. It works really well. You can move items if you want. Here's a hat that I moved. And looking at that Rams hat, it had really no way of telling what was behind that photo. Just a little bit of white on either side. And it pulled that out, I think, really, really well. And how it handles, and again, not new. Other phones have done these, but I think how it handles it, again, is the most impressive. And this isn't our versus yet, and I can't wait to make this video, but just for fun, here's a comparison of how Apple Intelligence handles that same test. Now, obviously, this is a very small piece of the AI puzzle, but it is just a really impressive one. So AI is obviously really impressive in the S25 Ultra, but that is not the only implementation of AI that is really useful. Meet this video sponsor. So these are the V-Aim Rec Dot earbuds, and they are AI-powered earbuds. And before you click away, these actually do something that I have never seen before in earbuds. But first, they do all the things that you would expect earbuds to do. They've got really incredible noise cancellation, all the way up to 48 decibels. They've got transparency mode, normal mode, 4 mic array built in, but they're called Rec Dot because that little record button on the case itself, there's an app too that'll pair with it. And what this is gonna do, again, I said something I've never seen before, it's got something called flash record. It's a real-time recording. So this is an example off the top of my head that just pulling out of nowhere, it didn't actually happen. Maybe your wife is giving you a list of things to pick up from the grocery store. Instead of calling her 16 times to ask what kind, it'll automatically record that conversation for you, and you could see the text on your phone. You don't even have to have the earbuds in to do it. It'll translate for you on top of that from different languages. And if you're watching, say, a YouTube video and you wanna have the translation from that YouTube video show up on your phone, you can do that as well. There's a ton of AI features built in. All those features are incredibly useful. And having this conversation, have it record for you, you don't have to like hold the earbuds up to somebody or have your head sitting next to them. It can be up to 7 meters, which by my math is about 23 feet away. So you can just have normal conversations. It'll generate to-do lists and summary notes all on its own. It is a long list of things these headphones do. And if you never use any of those AI features, these are a really good pair of headphones for music, for if you're on a train or an airplane and you want to black out the noise around you. 11mm dynamic speakers, high-res audio. Battery is going to last for 9 hours on the earbuds themselves, or 36 hours with the case. It'll charge really fast too, 5 minutes to give you an hour. They even have kind of a find my earbuds type feature built in as well. Anything that you would want a pair of earbuds to have, this has it. Plus the really useful AI features that actually work as they're supposed to. You want to check out the Rec Dot headphones for yourself in the market for new headphones. Really tiny case, fit easily in your pocket or bag. Link will be down below. Also, other stuff here too that we've seen in other phones, Circle to translate, generative AI from prompts, and a ton more. But if you take anything away from this section, and this is like the meat of the AI and probably the meat of the whole phone, is that while Samsung definitely did not invent AI on a phone, I do think that they've perfected it so far. So, all right, quick heat check on build and display versus the S24. Slightly better, not huge steps forward. But what about camera? Samsung's done a pretty good job there in the past, right? Let's start with specs. And while I do, here are some samples right from the phone to look at. So same 200 megapixel main camera as last year, same 10 megapixel 3x, same 50 megapixel 5x telephoto camera. There is a new 50 megapixel ultra wide, which is a big difference up from 12 last year, then 12 megapixel front with autofocus. And just like look at the pictures. I wanna show the zoom array here too. Here's a shot just with the ultra wide. You can't see that much detail at the end of the street. And if I zoom all the way in, you can't see what's there. But if you go through the various sort of zoom lengths that you've got, you go up to 10 optical and 100 digital, it becomes really good. And these type of space zooms used to look like Picasso paintings. Now they're actually surprisingly useful, and I love zoom. I use zoom all the time. Some photos I was zooming in on my kids playing baseball. That is my use case for a lot of these phones. It's like, how do I get the best shots of my family doing things? And for me, zoom is huge, and Samsung nailed it here. On the video side, you've got new log video mode on 10-bit HDR, which is nice if you want to add LUTs or if anyone that wants to use this as like an actual video camera. But that's just specs. Any phone over $1,000, I think is going to have a really good camera system, right? Like, I can't think of any phone over $1,000 that is not going to give you good photos. Samsung did something really different with the S25 Ultra that they have not done before. If I showed you prior to this phone any photo that was done and shot by a Samsung, you could tell. Even adjectives describe the style. It looks Samsung-y. That means it's got high contrast, it's got bright poppy colors. Usually the photos look great on the device. Post them on social media. If you tried to do some editing on them on a PC, you lost a lot of it. And I think you can tell with some of those shots earlier, we need some new descriptive words because the S25 Ultra looks very different. Colors are way less oversaturated and more true to life. I'm even gonna say maybe even muted, especially compared to what they've done in the past. I think it's a giant step for Samsung. Now you can tweak the pictures to look more Samsung-y if you want, but I think this is a new direction for what Samsung's doing with their phones. There's obviously AI taking place behind the scenes, but giving more muted, true to life photos, I think is a huge step to competing. And Samsung is competing in really crowded waters. And that impressiveness with the cameras even goes to low light as well. First of all, they are way less noisy and some of the best low light shots I've ever seen. Here's a shot that I took like in our bathroom here at the studio, and it was pretty dark. You can make out crazy detail. Even if you pixel peep, it still looks good. I can make out the time on the clock. I can see the patterns on that red ball. That was really, really impressive. And that kind of detail, especially on low light, I think would have been impossible before. There's also, if you want to zoom in with your finger, very familiar looking zoom slider that I think is pretty handy. Shutter speed also is crazy fast. I don't know why I did it, but I threw a lemon up in the air and took a picture of it. You can see kind of how fast it worked. It's not in focus. It pulled focus from the back instead of the lemon itself. But I was impressed. I didn't get just like a yellow streak coming down the screen. Okay, so despite the spec sheet being relatively similar, I do think cameras are a huge improvement. And all of this is being powered by the insanely fast Snapdragon 8 Elite for Galaxy, which is 3nm. That part doesn't matter, I just think it's cool that it's 3nm. 12 gigabytes of RAM on here. And for a flagship, I don't think is nearly enough, especially considering that's the same amount of RAM Samsung's offered, I believe, going back to the Galaxy S20 Ultra. But that's all the RAM you're gonna get unless you live in Korea. It doesn't hold the phone back now at all. It is insanely fast. But I do worry when you get to Android 16, 17, and beyond that maybe you might start to notice that you're hitting up against that headroom. The phone right now is bonkers fast. Here are some benchmarks if you want to see it. I don't spend that much time focusing on the benchmarks, but you can see incredibly fast. What I care about is how it works now and how it's going to work in the future. For the future part, you'll get 7 years of OS updates, and the processor has headroom for absolute years. Again, you might be RAM constrained. It's not gonna be the processor's fault. I think Qualcomm nailed this processor from every aspect. Gaming is also insanely fast. It can sustain 120 FPS longer than most other flagships. Again, gaming is fast, gaming looks good, and then can sustain that, I'm assuming because of the vapor chamber. It's sort of doesn't have to worry about that heat. I do wonder though what percentage of people are seriously gaming on their phones though. If you just use your phone like a phone, you're gonna get the smoothest level of performance I've ever seen on a phone, not just an Android phone, at least for now. And that's in large part due to One UI 7 sitting on top of Android 15. I don't know how you feel about One UI or its aesthetic versus other takes on Android. It is extremely fleshed out and full featured, even if it does, at least for me, kind of frustratingly duplicate a lot of features that Google already has baked in. The S25 Ultra is really close to being the most ideal phone, but it doesn't exist in a vacuum. and it is not perfect. The S Pen, while awesome, I don't use it too much, but I know people love it. It did lose Bluetooth functionality, helpful for controlling playback and things like that. Samsung claimed that people weren't using it, but for a phone that costs this much, you would expect features to be taken out. A lot of other flagship phones now are launching with IP69. And I don't ever expect this phone to get exposed to high pressure water jets. It's a big difference between IP68 and 69. But again, at flagship pricing, it's definitely an omission. As I mentioned earlier too, as is the lack of silicon nanostack battery technology that other flagships are starting to have. Again, not a deal breaker since battery life is really good, but if you're comparing it to everything else out there in the phone world, I still think it's an omission. So the conclusion, is this phone marketably better than last year's? No, it's not. But this phone is still a really quality phone that does AI better than any phone that I have ever tested before then. And again, besting what I think is already really impressive Pixel 9 series from Google. I know it's gonna ruffle some feathers, but Samsung clearly worked hand in hand with Google to make this phone as full featured as it is. It looks the same, it feels different, it performs better. I have concerns about RAM. If you're looking for a new phone and your current phone is older than say 16 to 18 months, whether you are on iPhone, whether you're on Android, you will not be disappointed with what Samsung has done with the S25 Ultra. I can definitely recommend it.